Have you ever wondered what happens to people who are full of pride, selfishness, and arrogance? Why do some seem to get away with hurting others while living for themselves? Do you sometimes feel frustrated asking, where is the justice? The Bible has powerful answers to these questions. It reveals that while narcissists may seem to thrive for a time, their future is far from bright. God's Word gives us clear examples of how prideful and self-centered behavior leads to destruction. More importantly, it offers hope for those who've been hurt by such people, promising justice and healing. But here's something to think about. Could we sometimes show signs of selfishness or pride ourselves? The Bible challenges all of us to look at our own hearts while trusting God to deal with those who act unjustly. Stay with us as we dive into fascinating stories, clear warnings, and hopeful promises from Scripture. We'll explore the fate of narcissistic behavior, God's justice, and how to find peace if you've been affected by it. Join this growing community of people who are seeking answers, strength, and hope through the Word of God. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What does divine justice mean to you? How have you seen God work in situations that seemed unfair? Let's walk this journey together. Hit the like button, subscribe, and stay tuned for insights that will deepen your faith and remind you of God's unshakable justice. Together we'll uncover the powerful truths hidden in the Bible that will inspire and strengthen you for life's challenges. Throughout history, pride and arrogance have been at the center of many downfalls. The Bible has much to say about these traits, warning us of their destructive power. Narcissism, a behavior marked by selfishness, a hunger for praise, and an inflated sense of self-importance, might seem like a modern concept, but its roots go back to biblical times. In Scripture, one of the clearest examples of narcissism is Lucifer. Once a beautiful and powerful angel, Lucifer's pride led him to rebel against God. He didn't want to serve, he wanted to rule. In Isaiah 14:13-14, Lucifer declares, "I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God." But this self-centered ambition resulted in his downfall. God cast him out of heaven, and he became Satan, the enemy of all that is good. This story shows how pride blinds us to the truth and leads to destruction. Another example is King Saul, Israel's first king. At first, Saul was humble and obedient to God, but as he tasted power, pride began to consume him. He became jealous of David's growing popularity and let his insecurities and arrogance guide his decisions. Instead of trusting God, Saul tried to hold on to his power at all costs, leading to his eventual failure as king. His life is a sobering reminder of how pride can isolate us from others and from God. Now think about the world today. Doesn't it feel like pride and self-promotion are everywhere? From social media to workplaces, people are often encouraged to put themselves first, seek attention, and avoid admitting mistakes. But the Bible teaches the opposite. Proverbs 16:18 warns, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall." These stories and verses remind us that narcissism is not just a personal issue, it's a spiritual one. When we place ourselves above others and even above God, we walk a dangerous path. Instead, we are called to humility, putting others before ourselves and trusting in God's plan. The rise of narcissism is not new, but neither is God's answer, humility and obedience. By looking to these biblical examples, we can learn to guard our hearts and stay on the path of righteousness. Pride is often seen as one of the most dangerous emotions in the Bible. It's not just about feeling good about ourselves, it's about elevating ourselves above others and even above God. When someone is consumed by pride, it often leads to a sense of entitlement, selfishness, and a refusal to acknowledge faults or weaknesses. This is the root of narcissism, and according to the Bible, it can have disastrous consequences. One of the most direct and powerful verses about pride is found in Proverbs 16:18, which says, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. This verse is a clear warning that pride doesn't just lead to problems, it leads to complete downfall. It's like walking on the edge of a cliff. The higher we climb in our arrogance, the harder the fall when we slip. The Bible shows us time and again how people who allowed pride to take over their hearts eventually faced serious consequences. Pride makes us think we're invincible. It fills us with the illusion that we're better than others, and sometimes even better than God's commands. This is what happened to Lucifer, one of the most significant examples of pride in the Bible. He was created as an angel with great beauty and power, yet he became full of pride and sought to overthrow God. In Isaiah 14:13-14, Lucifer says, "I will ascend to heaven, I will raise my throne above the stars of God, I will make myself like the Most High." His pride led him to rebel against God, and as a result, he was cast down from heaven and became Satan, the enemy of all that is good. Lucifer's story shows just how dangerous pride can be. What started as arrogance led to a catastrophic fall from grace. Another example in the Bible is King Saul, Israel's first king. When Saul was first chosen by God, he was humble and obedient, but over time his pride began to grow. He became jealous of David, the young shepherd, who was becoming more popular, and his pride led him to make foolish decisions. Instead of relying on God, Saul tried to control everything himself, even disobeying God's commands. In 1 Samuel 15, when God commanded Saul to destroy the Amalekites, Saul disobeyed, sparing the king and the best of the livestock. When confronted by the prophet Samuel, Saul's pride prevented him from truly repenting, and this eventually led to his downfall as king. Saul's life shows how narcissistic pride not only damages our relationship with others, but also our relationship with God. The Bible doesn't just warn us about the dangers of pride, it also shows us the importance of humility. In James 4:6, it says, "God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble." This verse reminds us that while pride leads to destruction, humility opens the door to God's grace and favor. Humility is the opposite of narcissism, and it is what God desires from us. Rather than seeking to elevate ourselves, God calls us to lift others up and live with a heart of service and love. Proverbs 16:18 isn't just a warning for others, it's a reminder for all of us to examine our own hearts. If we allow pride and arrogance to grow within us, we may find ourselves headed down a dangerous path. But when we choose humility, we align ourselves with God's will and invite His blessings into our lives. The story of the Tower of Babel, found in Genesis 11, is one of the most powerful biblical examples of the dangers of collective narcissism, when a group of people elevate themselves and their achievements above God. This story illustrates how pride, self-exaltation, and a desire for control can lead to chaos and division. But it also shows how God responds to human arrogance with a decisive intervention, ultimately reminding us of His power and authority over all things. In the beginning of Genesis 11, we learn that after the Great Flood, all of humanity spoke a single language and settled in the land of Shinar. Instead of scattering across the earth as God had commanded them to do, in Genesis 9:1, the people decided to stay together and build a great city and a towering structure that reached the heavens. The people said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." Genesis 11:4. The idea of building a tower was more than just an architectural project. It was a symbol of their desire to exalt themselves and make a name for themselves. They were no longer content with the purpose God had given them. Instead of spreading out to fill the earth, they sought to stay in one place and build something so magnificent that it would make them famous and powerful. At the heart of their ambition was pride, a desire to be like God and to control their own destiny. They wanted to reach the heavens, not just in terms of height, but in terms of status and glory. The people's decision to build the Tower of Babel can be seen as an example of collective narcissism. Just as individuals driven by narcissism think only of their own desires and glory, these people were focused entirely on their own achievements. They wanted to elevate themselves and be seen as powerful without considering God's will for them. Their collective pride was so overwhelming that they thought they could defy God's command and create a new path for themselves, one where they would be in control. But God did not allow this act of self-exaltation to go unchallenged. In Genesis 11:5-7, we see God's response. But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the people were building. The Lord said, "If as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other." God's intervention was swift and powerful. He confused their language, causing the people to no longer understand one another. As a result, they were unable to continue their work, and the tower was left unfinished. The people were scattered across the earth, just as God had originally intended. The very thing they feared, being scattered, happened as a result of their attempt to control their own destiny. The story of Babel is a powerful reminder of the dangers of pride and self-exaltation. When people seek to glorify themselves, ignoring God's authority, they can end up facing confusion, division, and failure. The Tower of Babel shows that no matter how great our plans or ambitions may be, they are nothing without God's blessing. When we try to elevate ourselves above others or even above God, we set ourselves up for a fall. This story also highlights the importance of humility. While the people of Babel sought to make a name for themselves, the Bible teaches us that true greatness comes from serving God and others, not from building our own empires. Jesus taught his followers in Matthew 23:12, "Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted." The Tower of Babel serves as a timeless warning against the dangers of self-exaltation and a call to embrace humility and trust in God's plan for our lives. In Matthew 23:27-28, Jesus delivers a powerful rebuke to the Pharisees, one of the most religious and respected groups in Jewish society during his time. He calls them whitewashed tombs, appearing beautiful on the outside but full of death and corruption on the inside. Through this strong language, Jesus is pointing out the dangers of self-righteousness and hypocrisy, which are closely related to narcissism. The Pharisees were consumed with an inflated sense of their own holiness, but they were blind to the deeper issues within their hearts. This passage offers a stark warning about the spiritual consequences of narcissistic behavior. The Pharisees prided themselves on their outward appearances and strict adherence to the law. They were known for their public displays of piety, such as long prayers and elaborate religious rituals, which were meant to show how devout they were. To the outside world, they seemed to be models of righteousness. However, Jesus saw beyond their external actions and exposed the emptiness within them. He said, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean." Matthew 23:27. This image of a tomb, beautifully painted but holding decay inside, perfectly illustrates the emptiness of narcissistic self-righteousness. What Jesus is really addressing here is the Pharisees' hypocrisy. They were not concerned with true righteousness or humility before God. They were more focused on how they appeared to others. This is a key trait of narcissism, the need to be seen as perfect and blameless regardless of the true state of the heart. The Pharisees were like actors, playing a part to gain admiration and respect, while their actions did not match the inner truth of their hearts. In Matthew 23:28, Jesus continues his rebuke, saying, "In the same way on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness." Jesus isn't just condemning their actions, he's condemning their hearts. While the Pharisees wanted to be seen as holy and righteous, they were filled with pride, self-centeredness, and a lack of genuine compassion. Their actions were driven by the desire to elevate themselves, not to serve God or love others. This is the essence of narcissism, a focus on one's own image and a disregard for the true inner transformation that God desires. The spiritual consequences of narcissism, particularly in the form of hypocrisy, are severe. Jesus' warning to the Pharisees highlights the emptiness of living a life focused on self-glorification. Narcissistic pride may gain temporary admiration or approval from others, but it leaves the individual spiritually bankrupt. A person who is more concerned with how they are seen rather than what is truly in their heart misses the point of God's message entirely. In the end, their actions will not lead to true transformation, but to spiritual death. Jesus' teachings about the Pharisees also call us to examine our own hearts. Are we more concerned with how others see us than with the sincerity of our relationship with God? Do we seek recognition for our good deeds, or do we do them out of love and humility? In Matthew 23:12, Jesus reminds us, "Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted." The way to avoid the spiritual downfall of narcissism is to embrace humility, recognizing that true righteousness comes from a heart that seeks to serve and honor God, not one that craves admiration and praise. Through his rebuke of the Pharisees, Jesus offers a clear lesson. Narcissism, especially in the form of self-righteousness, leads to spiritual decay. True righteousness comes from humility and a heart that seeks to please God, not the applause of others. This is a message we must all take to heart, ensuring that our actions reflect a genuine love for God and others, rather than a desire to elevate ourselves above them. In Galatians 6:7, the Apostle Paul delivers a timeless and powerful truth. "Do not be deceived, God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." This principle of sowing and reaping is a central theme in the Bible and speaks to the inevitable consequences of our actions. For the narcissist, someone who lives focused on their own self-interest, self-glorification, and manipulation of others, this verse carries a stark warning. While they may seem to escape immediate consequences for their actions, the principle of reaping what you sow means that their actions will ultimately catch up with them, leading to a bleak future. The idea of sowing and reaping is straightforward. Whatever a person plants, they will eventually harvest. If they sow good, righteous actions, they will reap a life filled with blessings, peace, and fulfillment. But if they sow harmful, selfish, and deceitful actions, they will eventually reap destruction, loss, and regret. Narcissists, who often sow seeds of manipulation, deceit, and pride, may feel momentarily invincible, but this verse assures us that no one can escape the consequences of their actions forever. For the narcissist, their actions are often rooted in selfishness, arrogance, and a disregard for others. They manipulate, deceive, and take advantage of people to build their own image and secure their own power. However, Galatians 6:7 makes it clear that these actions will not go unnoticed. Even if they seem to succeed for a time, the seeds they plant in others will eventually grow into a harvest of pain and destruction. Just as they sow dishonesty, control, and pride, they will eventually reap the isolation, betrayal, and loneliness that often accompany such behaviors. This biblical truth serves as both a warning and a promise. For the narcissist, it is a warning that their manipulation and self-centered actions will not go unpunished. God, in his justice, will not allow evil to prevail indefinitely. While narcissists may enjoy temporary success by exploiting others, they will ultimately face the consequences of their actions. Whether in this life or the next, the harvest they reap will reflect the seeds they have sown. It is a principle of divine justice that no one can escape. On the other hand, this verse also brings comfort to those who may have been hurt by the narcissist's actions. If you have been the victim of manipulation, deceit, or abuse, you can trust that God sees your pain and will bring justice. Galatians 6:7 reminds us that God cannot be mocked, and those who sow harm will eventually face the repercussions of their actions. It may seem like the narcissist is getting away with their behavior, but God's justice is certain, and the truth will come to light. For all of us, this verse challenges us to reflect on the seeds we are sowing in our own lives. Are we living in a way that reflects humility, love, and respect for others? Are we sowing kindness, honesty, and integrity? Or are we sowing selfishness, pride, and manipulation, hoping to avoid the consequences? The truth is that our actions have consequences both in this life and the next, and we will ultimately reap what we sow. For the narcissist, Galatians 6:7 serves as a sobering reminder that their self-centered ways will eventually come back to haunt them. While they may temporarily seem to prosper, the harvest they are sowing will lead to their downfall. But for those who choose humility, kindness, and righteousness, the promise is that they will reap a life of peace, fulfillment, and divine blessing. In the end, God's justice will prevail, and we all will face the consequences of our choices. In the Bible, the story of Lucifer's fall from grace is one of the clearest and most tragic examples of how pride and self-obsession can lead to a complete downfall. In Isaiah 14:12-15 and Ezekiel 28:17, we see how Lucifer's narcissism and arrogance, rooted in his desire for self-glorification, ultimately led to his eternal fall. These passages shed light on the destructive power of pride and the catastrophic consequences of exalting oneself above God. In Isaiah 14:12-15, the prophet Isaiah describes Lucifer's fall in vivid detail. "How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to the realm of the dead, to the depths of the pit." Isaiah 14:12-15, NIV. These verses give us a glimpse into Lucifer's heart before his fall. Lucifer, the most beautiful and powerful of all God's angels, became consumed with pride. He sought to elevate himself above God, desiring to sit on a throne above all others. His pride led him to say, "I will ascend to the heavens. I will make myself like the Most High." Isaiah 14:14. This is the essence of narcissism, a deep, unchecked self-obsession that leads one to believe they are worthy of the same glory and power as God. Lucifer wanted to be worshipped, adored, and exalted in the same way that God is. However, this pride and self-exaltation ultimately led to his downfall. God cast Lucifer down from heaven, sending him to the depths of the pit, where he would face eternal separation from God's presence. Lucifer's fall serves as a powerful warning that no one, not even the highest angel in heaven, can escape the consequences of pride and self-obsession. When a person, or even an angel, elevates themselves above God, they invite destruction into their life. In Ezekiel 28:17, the prophet Ezekiel also speaks of Lucifer's fall, describing how his pride led to his ruin. "Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. So I threw you to the earth. I made a spectacle of you before kings." Ezekiel 28:17, NIV. Lucifer's beauty and wisdom, which were given to him by God, became the very things that led to his downfall. His pride in his own beauty and power caused him to lose sight of his true purpose, which was to glorify God. He became obsessed with himself, believing that he was above all others and that his wisdom and splendor made him deserving of more. This arrogance corrupted his heart and mind, leading to his ultimate destruction. Lucifer's fall is the ultimate example of how pride and self-obsession lead to ruin. His desire to be like God, to be worshipped and adored, caused him to rebel against the Creator. The Bible teaches us that pride is the root of many sins, and Lucifer's fall is a dramatic illustration of how destructive this sin can be. By elevating himself above God, Lucifer not only lost his position in heaven, but also condemned himself to eternal separation from God. For those who allow pride and narcissism to control their lives, the consequences are just as severe. Just as Lucifer's self-obsession led to his fall, anyone who elevates themselves above God, seeking their own glory, is walking down a dangerous path. The Bible consistently warns us that pride comes before a fall, Proverbs 16:18. Lucifer's story serves as a solemn reminder that no one can escape the destructive power of narcissism and self-glorification. In the end, Lucifer's fall is a powerful testimony to the dangers of pride. It reminds us that when we seek to elevate ourselves above others or above God, we are setting ourselves up for destruction. Just as God cast Lucifer out of heaven, he will not allow anyone to continue in their arrogance without facing the consequences. The story of Lucifer is a warning to all of us. Pride and self-obsession lead to a tragic fall, and only humility before God can lead to true greatness. In the Bible, James 4:6 and 1 Peter 5:5 teach us a powerful and humbling truth. God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. These verses offer insight into how God's justice works in a world filled with pride and self-centeredness, and they reveal the divine pattern of lifting up the humble while bringing down the narcissist. James 4:6 says, "But he gives us more grace." That is why Scripture says, God opposes the proud but shows favor to the humble. This is a clear and direct statement about the way God operates. In his justice, God does not tolerate pride or arrogance, especially when it leads to a disregard for others. The proud, those who are narcissistic and self-centered, seek to elevate themselves above everyone else, often seeking power, control, and recognition. But God, in his wisdom and justice, opposes this pride. He resists those who exalt themselves, bringing them down from their positions of arrogance. The concept of God opposing the proud is not just about a passive stance, it's an active opposition. The Bible teaches us that God's justice is fierce when it comes to pride. Proverbs 16:5 also echoes this truth. The Lord detests all the proud of heart. Be sure of this, they will not go unpunished. When someone lives in narcissism and pride, trying to exalt themselves above others, they ultimately find themselves opposed by the very creator of the universe. The prideful may think they can control their destiny, but in the end, they will face the consequences of their arrogance. On the other hand, God's grace is poured out on the humble. Humility is the opposite of narcissism. The humble recognize their dependence on God, and they don't seek to elevate themselves above others. Instead, they acknowledge their flaws and weaknesses, seeking God's will rather than their own. 1 Peter 5:5 emphasizes this. In the same way, you who are younger, submit yourselves to your elders. All of you, clothe yourselves with humility toward one another, because God opposes the proud but shows favor to the humble. Humility is a key characteristic that aligns us with God's heart. The humble submit to God's authority and seek to serve others, not themselves. They don't demand recognition or control. Instead, they trust God to exalt them in His timing. God's justice is evident in how He responds to both pride and humility. The narcissist, who is driven by self-obsession and a desire for power, is eventually brought low. Their pride will not go unpunished, and their efforts to build themselves up will come crashing down. God, in His justice, brings down the proud so that they may learn the humility that leads to true wisdom. In contrast, those who choose humility are elevated by God. His grace is given freely to those who humble themselves, and He lifts them up at the proper time. This biblical principle is clear. Pride leads to destruction, but humility leads to grace. The narcissist who builds their life on self-importance will eventually face God's opposition. But the humble, who walk in meekness and humility before God, will receive His favor. Matthew 23:12 further underscores this truth, where Jesus says, "For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." The message here is both a warning and a promise. To the proud, the narcissists who live for their own glory, God opposes their ways. They may seem to prosper for a time, but their pride will ultimately lead to their downfall. For the humble, however, God's grace and favor are guaranteed. He will lift them up in due time and bless them with peace, purpose, and fulfillment. The way of humility leads to life, while the way of pride leads to destruction. This is the justice of God at work, a justice that resists the proud but exalts the humble. In Matthew 7:26-27, Jesus tells a powerful parable that speaks to the dangers of building one's life on a fragile foundation. The passage states, "But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash." Matthew 7:26-27, NIV. This parable is not just about construction, it's a metaphor for the lives we build. It illustrates how a person's choices, attitudes, and values form the foundation of their life. For the narcissist, whose foundation is built on pride, self-importance, and a desire for control, their life is ultimately destined for ruin. The metaphor of building on sand speaks to the idea that the foundation of the narcissist's life is unstable and unreliable. Like sand, which shifts and moves easily, the narcissist's life is built on a foundation that cannot withstand the pressures and challenges of life. Narcissism is rooted in self-obsession and a need for admiration, which is inherently fragile. The narcissist may seek external validation through accomplishments, appearances, or power, but these things are temporary and unreliable. When life's inevitable storms hit, whether in the form of personal failure, loss, or societal challenges, the narcissist's self-centered foundation will not hold up. The narcissist's fragile foundation is constantly at risk. Just like a house built on sand, their life is susceptible to collapse. The pride and arrogance that keep them focused on themselves provide no true stability. As soon as adversity strikes, the self-centered world that the narcissist has carefully constructed begins to crumble. This collapse is not just physical, but spiritual and emotional. The narcissist's identity is so tied to their outward image that any storm, whether a setback or a challenge to their status, can cause their sense of self to shatter. Contrast this with the one who builds their house on the solid foundation of Jesus' teachings. The one who seeks to live a humble, righteous life based on God's truth is like the wise person who builds their house on rock. In Matthew 7:24-25, Jesus says, "Therefore everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock." For the narcissist, their fragile foundation will eventually fail when tested by life's storms. Whether the challenge comes in the form of failure, loss, or rejection, The narcissist's reliance on external validation will be exposed as insufficient. Their pride, which once seemed to elevate them, will no longer hold up under pressure, and their world will come crashing down. The parable of the fool who built on sand serves as a clear warning to those who live in narcissism. The foundation of self-centeredness may appear strong in the moment, but it is ultimately hollow and unable to withstand the storms of life. When life becomes difficult, those who build on pride, arrogance, and the need for validation will see their lives unravel. Their fragile sense of self will crumble, leaving them exposed to the consequences of their own choices. In conclusion, the parable of the foolish builder in Matthew 7:26-27 is a powerful metaphor for the narcissist's life. Like a house built on sand, their life is unstable, and their pride-filled foundation will not hold up when tested by life's inevitable challenges. Only by building on the solid foundation of humility, truth, and faith in God can one withstand life's storms and stand firm when everything else falls apart. In Luke 8:17, Jesus gives us a profound truth. For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. This verse emphasizes the ultimate revelation of truth, no matter how much someone tries to hide or disguise their true nature. For the narcissist, who often lives behind a carefully crafted mask of charm, confidence, and superiority, this verse serves as a powerful reminder that no matter how much they try to deceive others, the truth will always come to light. Narcissists are known for their ability to manipulate situations and present a facade of perfection. They often wear a mask of arrogance, superiority, and control, attempting to convince others that they are invincible and without flaw. However, this mask is fragile and unsustainable. While the narcissist may fool others for a time, their true character, filled with selfishness, pride, and a lack of empathy, cannot remain hidden forever. In the end, their actions, motivations, and the harm they cause to others will inevitably be exposed. Luke 8:17 speaks to the certainty that truth will prevail. No matter how cleverly the narcissist tries to conceal their self-centeredness, the truth about their behavior, their motives, and their impact on others will eventually come to light. Whether through the consequences of their own actions or through the revelation of others, the mask they wear will be lifted. The consequences of living a life built on deception and narcissism will eventually catch up with them. Their prideful actions, the lies they tell, and the harm they cause will no longer stay hidden. The narcissist's mask may protect them for a while, but it is not invincible. The more they try to control how others see them, the more they open themselves to being exposed. The longer they live in a false reality, the closer they get to their eventual downfall. The truth, as promised in Luke 8:17, cannot be kept hidden. It will always triumph in the end. This is the divine principle that no amount of manipulation or deception can change. The narcissist may try to deceive others, but their inner flaws, their lack of authenticity, and the selfishness that drives them will eventually be brought to light. For those who have been hurt by narcissists, this is a comforting truth. While it may seem like the narcissist gets away with their behavior in the moment, the truth will always come to the surface. Whether through the revelation of their lies, the discovery of their manipulations, or the consequences of their actions, the truth will prevail. The mask they wear will eventually be unveiled, and their true nature will be exposed for all to see. For the narcissist themselves, this is a sobering reminder. No amount of self-deception or manipulation can shield them from the inevitable consequences of their actions. The truth will always find a way to be revealed, and when it does, the consequences will be severe. Narcissists may enjoy temporary success or admiration, but their lack of authenticity and their disregard for others will eventually lead to their downfall. The truth will triumph over their lies, and the mask they've carefully constructed will crumble. In conclusion, Luke 8:17 assures us that nothing remains hidden forever. The narcissist's mask may protect them for a time, but ultimately their true character will be revealed. Truth has a way of shining through the darkness, and no amount of manipulation or deceit can keep it from coming to light. The narcissist cannot escape the consequences of their actions, and the truth will always triumph over the facade they've built. This verse reminds us that in the end, truth will win. In a world where narcissism often leads to manipulation, exploitation, and harm, the oppressed can feel hopeless. Those who have been hurt by narcissistic behavior may wonder if justice will ever be served. However, Psalm 37:7-13 and Isaiah 54:17 offer profound promises from God, assuring those who have been wronged that He will protect them and bring about their vindication. These scriptures remind us that in the end, God's justice will prevail, and He is always on the side of the oppressed. Psalm 37:7-13 provides a powerful reassurance for anyone who has been victimized by narcissism, whether in personal relationships or larger societal structures. It begins by advising us to be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Psalm 37:7. In moments of hurt, betrayal, or manipulation, it can be easy to seek immediate retribution or revenge. But God calls us to trust in His timing. His justice is perfect, and His protection will come when it is needed most. The passage goes on to describe the fate of the wicked and the narcissistic individuals who cause harm. For like the grass they will soon wither, like green plants they will soon die away. Psalm 37 verse 2. The narcissist, no matter how powerful or influential they may seem, is temporary. Their pride and arrogance will not stand forever. In contrast, those who have been wronged and who wait patiently for God's intervention will be rewarded. God promises that the meek will inherit the earth and that He will protect and provide for those who trust in Him. Psalm 37:11. Isaiah 54:17 gives further assurance, stating, "No weapon forged against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you." This verse speaks directly to those who have suffered at the hands of narcissistic individuals. The narcissist may use weapons of deceit, slander, and manipulation to harm others, but God promises that these weapons will not succeed. Every lie and every false accusation aimed at the oppressed will be overturned. This is a reminder that while the narcissist may seem to have power in the moment, God's ultimate power will prevail over them. Isaiah 54:17 also highlights the role of God's protection. For those who are oppressed, God promises that this is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. Isaiah 54:17. Those who have suffered injustice can take comfort knowing that their struggles are not in vain. God sees their pain, and He promises to vindicate them. The narcissist may think they are in control, but God's power is greater than any scheme or manipulation. His justice will prevail, and the oppressed will be set free. Together, Psalm 37:7-13 and Isaiah 54:17 offer a profound message of hope and reassurance. They remind us that God sees the pain of the oppressed and that in His perfect timing, He will bring about justice. The narcissists who harm others may seem to succeed for a time, but they will not escape God's judgment. For those who trust in Him, there is a promise of vindication and protection. No weapon formed against them will succeed, and no false accusation will stand. In conclusion, these verses provide comfort and hope for those who are suffering from narcissistic behavior. They remind us that God is a protector and a just judge who will bring about His justice for those who are wronged. The narcissists who use deceit and manipulation may have temporary success, but their time is limited. God's promises to vindicate and protect the oppressed are certain, and they offer assurance that in the end, truth and justice will prevail. In Luke 16:19-31, Jesus tells the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, which offers a profound illustration of how self-centeredness, selfishness, and narcissism in this life can lead to eternal consequences in the afterlife. This parable serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of living a life focused only on personal pleasure, wealth, and pride, while neglecting the needs of others. The story begins by describing two men: a rich man who lives in luxury and indulgence every day, and a poor beggar named Lazarus who is covered in sores and longs for scraps of food from the rich man's table. Despite their contrasting lives, the parable shows how their fates ultimately diverge after death. The rich man, who lived a life of excess and selfishness, finds himself in torment in Hades, while Lazarus, who suffered in life but remained humble and trusting in God, is comforted in the bosom of Abraham. Jesus uses this parable to demonstrate the spiritual consequences of narcissism, an attitude of living solely for oneself, disregarding the well-being of others. The rich man's failure to help Lazarus, who lay at his gate, reveals his complete disregard for others' suffering. His wealth and self-absorption blinded him to the needs around him. The parable makes it clear that, in the eyes of God, the rich man's self-centeredness is a sin that ultimately leads to his downfall in the afterlife. In the story, when the rich man finds himself in torment, he begs Abraham to send Lazarus to dip his finger in water to cool his tongue, but Abraham responds that there is a great chasm between them that cannot be crossed. The rich man's request for mercy is denied, and he realizes too late that his life of selfishness has led to his eternal torment. In this moment, the rich man's true character is revealed. He continues to focus on his own discomfort rather than seeking repentance or caring for those he harmed. His narcissism is so deeply ingrained that even in the afterlife he is still consumed with his own suffering and pride.